Bonjour. Greetings, everyone, all my relatives. I am here to share a very personal account of an extremely harrowing experience that I am currently going through. Firstly, I want to thank everyone that has supported me throughout my journey. There are so many of you that I would be here for literally hours naming everyone who has helped me to become the person I am today. It is with a heavy heart and great sadness that I am forced to step down from my voluntary service to the National Indian Education Association, specifically my duties as Secretary of the Board of Directors. I have come to this difficult decision after suffering from the negative effects of over 3 months of lateral violence at the hands of fellow board members. The ostracization I've experienced includes having my words misrepresented, having my words used against me, having my character misrepresented, me being separated from my work on the board, and me otherwise being outcast. The actions taken by various members on the board, regardless of how well intentioned, have created an environment of distrust and division, and they do not align with Indigenous belief systems, values, or traditional ways of being. These expressions of lateral oppression and lateral violence reveal a deep-rooted sense of colonization and self-hate. This has been witnessed and experienced by not only me, but individuals both on the board and among the general membership. This all started earlier this summer, back on May 24th. On May 24th, I made a Facebook post on my personal Facebook page. The post said, quote, "My guess is the deep state/CIA is carrying out these mass shootings in an effort to expedite the repeal of gun rights. Sadly, they use innocent people as pawns in their quest for authority and control. Remember all the conspiracy theories I've talked about in the past?" End quote. If you look back in my timeline, that post is still there. It's there for anyone to read. That post led to me being informed on June 1st that I was under investigation relative to complaints about comments I made on social media. It was at that time that I was also informed that I was not to attend the NIEA board retreat and golf tournament scheduled for Friday, June 3rd through Sunday, June 5th in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Keeping in mind that I had already purchased my plane ticket and made my travel arrangements. In a subsequent telephone conversation with the board president, I was told that he couldn't make me stay home, but if I demanded to attend, he would be forced to cancel the board retreat. I was ultimately left in a no-win situation because on one hand, if I demanded to attend, I risked alienating myself from any of my colleagues on the board who were sympathetic to me, and many of whom were traveling from across the country, from places like Hawaii, the East Coast, Alaska, Pacific Northwest, and Great Plains and Great Lakes regions. On the other hand, if I did not attend as the president requested, the very real possibility existed that board members would talk about the complaint and the subsequent allegations, and I would not be present to defend myself. Ultimately, I honored his request and did not attend the board meeting and retreat. In subsequent phone conversations leading up to my decision to stay at home from the event, the president informed me when asked why I was being asked to stay home that, quote, "some felt they would be uncomfortable with your presence and that would interfere with the work of the board, end quote. I was also informed that I was being accused of, quote, endangering school and student safety, end quote, and, quote, jeopardizing the mission of NIEA, end quote. Additionally, when I inquired further as to if he believed I had said or done anything to indicate violence or concern for safety, he said, quote unquote, no. It was at that moment, however, I realized a narrative was taking shape. A narrative to paint me as an undesirable and potential safety risk. Again, that was on June 1st. 3 weeks later, I received an official letter of investigation from the Ombudsman, Lori Quigley, which I will now read. Dear Brandon, in follow-up to your conversations with President Dropic, this letter is to provide you with written notice that the NIEA has received complaints about a recent statement you made through your Facebook account regarding school shootings. The complainants not only expressed alarm that the position you took would be detrimental to NIEA's advocacy efforts and public reputation, but also expressed apprehension for their personal safety due to the extreme and unsubstantiated nature of your comments. Your statements have raised broad concern among the NIEA Board of Directors. Therefore, the NIEA has initiated an investigation into your conduct to inform a final board determination regarding whether any action should be taken. Specifically, the complainants focus on statements you made through your Facebook account following the tragic mass shooting that occurred at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas. In your initial post, you stated that, quote, Deep State/CIA is carrying out these mass shootings in an effort to expedite the repeal of gun rights, end quote, without producing any evidence to support your claim. In addition, you subsequently defended your statements through a public post on Facebook, which did not express remorse and further articulated your unsubstantiated beliefs. As an NIEA board member, you have an obligation to protect the credibility of NIEA and to advance our mission and values. The complainants express that your statements are unbecoming of an NIEA director and will negatively impact NIEA's ability to pursue its mission to advance the education of American Indian, Alaskan Native, and Native Hawaiian people. As a leader in the field of education, NIEA directors are held to high standards and responsibilities. The investigation will be conducted in accordance with the procedures outlined in the NIEA Constitution and bylaws, as well as the board policies and procedures, parentheses, section F.V. As Ombudsman for NIEA, I will conduct an independent investigation and present my findings to the President, Executive Committee, and Board of Directors for further action. I will contact you to set a time for an interview regarding this matter. Further, you may provide me with any additional materials you deem appropriate to inform my review. Finally, you'll be provided an opportunity to address the Board of Directors on the investigation's results prior to any final board action. You are still bound by your responsibilities as an NIEA board director during this investigation. Therefore, please refrain from discussing this investigation with others unless pursuant to the authorized investigatory process. If you have any questions regarding the process, please contact me. Respectfully, Lori V. Quigley, NIEA Ombudsman. As you can see, it appears from the beginning of the investigation that it was slanted. They point to my initial post stating that I made unsubstantiated claims. However, if you go back on my page and look and listen to the words I just read, you will see that I used the word guess. And the word guess literally means unsubstantiated. It also means not based in fact. It was a pondering, a wondering, a literal guess. You'll see when I read my statement to the board in a little bit that I today believe my post to be a trauma response to a tragic and horrific event. Nowhere in my post did I make a claim. Reading further into the letter, you can see the ombudsman also pointed to a subsequent post asserting that I defended my, quote, unsubstantiated statements, end quote, and that I somehow needed to, quote, be remorseful, end quote. After reading that letter, I felt it imperative that I retain legal counsel to not only protect and defend my character, but also to protect my rights. On or about July 6th, I retained legal representation in an effort to proactively move forward with this situation, considering that this narrative was emerging, which painted me as a threat. I had no choice but to pay an exorbitant amount of money that I could not afford to protect myself from what I saw was the developing character assassination. Having to pay legal fees alone has created a situation of undue financial hardship on my family and me. There were nights where my son and I did not eat because I had used all of my money to defend myself from these unfair accusations. To this day, I have been behind on all of my bills, which has created an inordinate amount of stress and anxiety. And I'm not even going to mention that all of this was and is still happening in the middle of a recession that is impacting each and every one of us. Sometime around July 21st, I was notified through my legal counsel that I had until July 29th to submit either a written or oral response to the complaint. Through my attorneys, I submitted a written response on Friday, July 29th, which I will read here. Dear Ms. Quigley and members of the Board of Directors, I am writing in response to your investigation of several complaints made about 2 comments I posted on Facebook on May 24th and May 26, 2022. Following a meeting between NIEA's attorney, Gregory Smith, and my own legal counsel, I understand that the board is concerned that my posts may jeopardize the mission of NIEA and that the complainant is worried they may endanger someone's personal safety. Before I say anything more, I want to express my sincerest remorse if my messages jeopardized NIEA's reputation or its ability to pursue its mission effectively. That was never my intent, and I take full ownership of my posts. I only wanted to have a conversation about the event on my private Facebook wall because these issues matter so much. This investigation has helped me better understand the importance of expressing my thoughts and questions on politics in a more fruitful and judicious manner. Like you, I was shocked to learn of the horrifying tragedy in Uvalde, Texas, where 19 children and 2 teachers were murdered in cold blood. All of us felt anger, sadness, frustration, and confusion. These are understandable emotions to feel when we see Native school children killed. Like many of you, I took to social media to voice our hurt. I wondered if the government had something to do with the shooting in Uvalde because I remembered how the United States government once hunted and killed our ancestors while simultaneously telling them that all men have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. My posts were speculative because I wanted to initiate a dialogue. I wanted people to share their ideas because I am committed to a country of free and open speech. Like I said before, I mean it when I say that I am sorry for my questions. I am sorry if my questions jeopardize the political integrity of NIEA. I would never do anything to try to hurt it, but I will not compromise my passionate defense of the voiceless. So that takes me to something important, something we need to hear more of in an age where mass shootings happen on a near daily basis. Because this investigation also wants me to apologize for wanting to know who was responsible for the Uvalde school shooting and to bring them to justice. I apologize that I did not frame my questions in the most politically correct way possible, but I will never, ever apologize for defending the lives of Indigenous children. The investigation also alleges that my posts endangered someone's personal safety, and it's here I want to stop and take a minute to write to any of you reading this who has not yet made up his or her mind about this investigation. For those of you still undecided, I ask you to consider a couple of important propositions about this case. I want you to set aside all the politics, all the arguments, and all the differences that have divided our country so much over the past few years. Just think about what my messages said. You know there is not a single syllable in there that endangers anyone's personal safety. Those posts want children to be safe. I want us to live in a free and peaceful society. There's nothing in my posts that's hostile. Who was targeted? You know that the accusation that the posts endangered someone's well-being is so ridiculous that I have to ask, did the person who filed these complaints do so in good faith? Were they really worried about what they saw? Or did that person see an opportunity? And that brings me to my second point, something important I need you to know. Those in charge of this investigation, the ones who are supposed to be neutral throughout the process, haven't told you everything. There's something they don't want you to hear because it damages their story and it damages their picture of neutrality. You see, for every single time they've done something with this investigation, they twisted the facts just a little. For example, when they announced their investigation, they told us the following. In your initial post, you stated that the deep state CIA is carrying out these mass shootings in an effort to expedite the repeal of gun rights without producing any evidence to support your claim. But that's not what I wrote. I wrote that it was my guess. I never made a factual proposition. And if you think it's a small difference, then ask yourself, why did they feel the need to leave that part out? At the same time the investigation was announced, I was blocked from attending any board meetings, preventing me from representing my people before NIEA. I was told that if I demanded to attend a board meeting in Oklahoma City, Jason would cancel the event. Someone didn't want me there. Someone didn't trust you to hear my side of the story. Someone wants you to hear their side of the story. Their actions taint the integrity of the investigation and harm my constituents, our members, by depriving them of representation. The investigation has fallen so far below the standards that are necessary to be fair and impartial. Before I end my letter, I need to tell you something a bit personal. I'm worried. I'm worried about the welfare of Indigenous families. I'm worried about the future of an organization I love. And yes, I'm worried about my position on the board, because for the last 12 years, it has been my honor and privilege to fight for Native students, families, and communities on the front lines and to tackle the biggest issues facing Native people. I have worked in K-12 schools, colleges, and universities, working tirelessly for a safer and fairer space for all people of all colors, creeds, ethnicities, identities, genders, and economic backgrounds. I worked at the grassroots level to combat drug and alcohol addiction, violence, and poverty in our Native homes. I know my political opinions aren't necessarily shared by everyone. Honestly, they might not even be shared by any of you, but nothing in my posts ever endangered anyone. The idea that my years of round-the-clock service to Indigenous peoples can be dismissed overnight with an exaggerated complaint should trouble you. And the idea that you may be asked to vote on something by people who won't tell you all the facts, who won't let you hear my side of the story, and who insist they are neutral and fair, well, that should outrage you. Later, if you are asked to vote on this matter, take a moment to look at the posts themselves and weigh them for what they are and who they were made by. I never made a false claim. I never endangered someone's safety. I am passionate about my work and integrity of this organization. I understand that my words may have political consequences that extend beyond me. I take responsibility for those words, and I vow to exercise moderation and prudence moving forward. I know you want Indigenous children to be safe in schools. I want that too. I know you will make the right choice. Thank you, Brandon Tomes. So that was my letter to the board in response to the complaint. From that point on, I heard nothing regarding the complaint or investigation. Until I was asked to attend a meeting on Monday, August 29th. I was contacted on Friday, August 25th by President Dropic. And he did ask me if I would be available to meet with the board on the afternoon of Monday, August 29th, to discuss the complaint. He said that would allow me the opportunity to share my position on the matter. And after scrambling with my attorneys to prepare for that Monday meeting, I was finally able to meet with my colleagues at that time, to give my testimony. And I prepared a written statement, which I will read and share now. Bonjour, greetings. To begin, it was never my intent to have my words evolve into such a stressful, painful situation for the board and myself. When I posted my thoughts and ponderings on my personal Facebook page, I wanted to evoke critical thought and provide a forum for open dialogue on an important topic. In the wake of the events at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas, I, like so many others, expressed myself on social media. Having had time to reflect, I believe my response was a trauma response. As a Native man, I feel it is my responsibility to defend our women, children, elders, and communities. Hearing of the tragedy in Texas pained me to my core. On that day, I felt what everyone who cares about children felt: pain, anger, confusion, hopelessness, and distress. My comments on Facebook were a plea for answers, understanding, and accountability. For so many years, Native children have been the target of systematic and systemic violence at the hands of the federal government, organized religions, and Western society. Even now, 3 months after the tragedy at Robb Elementary School, there are still more questions than answers. The response by law enforcement that day has drawn outrage by parents, educators, community members, and people from across the country. Only time will reveal true details of the events of that day. Until then, we should all press for the truth so that we as a society may never again have to experience such horror and loss. It is apparent that my words, which are ultimately my thoughts, have been misconstrued. Everything that has transpired relative to this complaint and allegation goes against what I believe in. This situation goes against our inherent ways of being as Native people. Our ways are loving, compassionate, and gentle. Traditionally, elders of each tribe or nation, when an individual's words or conduct drew concern, would, in collaboration with those concerned, bring said individual in to speak with them to gain a better understanding of the situation. The ultimate goal was to not only address the concern, but bring all parties to an equitable and reasonable understanding. Only in extreme cases of misconduct or debauchery would an individual be exiled or removed from the family or community. In essence, I have been exiled. I've been outcast, isolated, and by default, alienated from my NIA family and community. I have been left to ask myself, was my conduct so egregious that I should be penalized to the extent I have? Over what? Simply because I shared a pondering on my personal social media page? I never threatened violence or made a false or untrue statement. Yet allegations against me are taken for fact and include that I endangered school and student safety and have jeopardized NIEA's mission. I have a constant thought of why wouldn't the person or persons who took exception to my comments on Facebook simply ask to counsel with me. Nothing I said projected or inferred violence. And for me to have been framed as a safety concern is troubling to me. I urge everyone to look for yourself at the post. I have nothing to hide. Since the first communication I received notifying me of the complaint and subsequent investigation, my life has consisted of an inordinate amount of stress, anxiety, and uncertainty. I have been excluded from meetings and forbidden from attending events. One of them, the board retreat in Oklahoma City. It is my understanding that a retreat is an event aimed at building relationships and increasing communication. In addition to having my relationships with my colleagues damaged, I have been systematically disconnected from my work on the board. I've also been disenfranchised, and I've been removed from representing my constituencies as a board member. If it weren't for the ongoing committee work, I would have no connection to this organization outside of my $80 paid membership. As if that weren't enough, the financial burden that retaining legal representation has placed on me and my family throughout this process has been excessive. I'm a single father with one income. As many of you know, I moved earlier this year, and that has increased my cost of living. Having to come up with a retainer and subsequent legal bills has created a situation where I am now forced to choose which bills get paid and which ones go to the bottom of the pile each month. There have been nights where I have not eaten to ensure there was enough food to feed my children. I'm not sharing any of this in an attempt to gain sympathy. I share this to help you understand that I indeed have been punished. In closing, I would like to share that I believe in supporting, nurturing, protecting, and advancing Indian education. I would never intentionally act in a way that would bring harm to NIEA or Indian people. That runs counter to who I am. It has been my life's work to advocate for Native people and our inherent rights. For those of you that know me, know that I have been on the front lines for years, whether it was on the front lines in the treaty wars in northern Wisconsin in the 80s and 90s, or battling drugs and alcohol and violence in our communities today. I have been there. Those of you who know me know that I am active in the community. You know that I am congruent and grounded in our traditional cultural teachings. I have worked in K-12, colleges, and universities to build cultural programming to create healthy environments for not only Native students, but students of all colors and backgrounds. You know that I stand for what is right. And when you have the truth on your side, you know you will be okay regardless of the outcome. And the truth is who I am and what I stand for. Miigwech, thank you, Brandon. So that was my oral/written response when I was able to meet with the board on August 29th on short notice. After reading my statement, I was asked to answer questions from the board. The assertion was made that my post had the potential to damage funding opportunities from the federal government, that my Facebook post could damage the organization's relationship with the government. And don't get me wrong, I've gone to DC, I've gone to state capitals, I've gone to the Capitol, and I've met with plenty of politicians and legislators and understand the importance of working within the political system and the framework therein. However, it felt surreal during that meeting. It was the realization that I wasn't in a bad dream. It was the realization that a great sadness began to creep over me. And it was at that time that several of the board members ambushed me, stating that there had been a history of concern regarding my social media use, among other things in my past. Those same members also made the assertion that I was previously made aware of these concerns, which is a flat-out untruth. It never happened. I had never been communicated to that there were concerns about my social media activity or anything regarding my past. Since I have not been provided with a copy of the actual complaint, a copy of the investigation report, any of the findings, or any other documentation prior to that meeting, I was caught unawares and put on the defensive. It appeared some of the members at that meeting were in receipt and actually viewing some sort of document or other information and basing some of their questions off of those materials. One member in particular, Allison Black, gaslit me by stating that, and I'm going to paraphrase what she said, quote, it was a fact that her and her husband are both educators and aren't paid nearly as much as they should be, and that I wasn't the only one struggling financially, end quote. Allison also went on to say, and again, I'm paraphrasing what she said, was that, quote, it appears that you were notified, you being me, that I was notified before about the activity on social media. And she also said, quote, I'm going to take that into consideration when making a decision on this. And it is again my claim that I had never ever been talked to or talked about or notified, communicated, or otherwise informed of any concern about my social media activity previously. There were other critics at that meeting as well. NIEA Board Treasurer Tasia Zentek, as well as another board member who had previously attempted a character assassination on me back in 2019, which people are aware of, and which are over my so-called, what I call non-political worldviews, all had questions that were tied to these documents that I had never seen or been made aware of. I was expected to answer questions about information I had never been privy to. Engaging from the tone and the questions posed to me, I'm confident that Allison and Tasia were some of the original complainants. And I will come back to this in a little bit because this is important. Moving ahead, It was during that same week that I was notified that the board would be holding yet another meeting to discuss the results of the investigation. And again, keeping in mind, I have yet to this moment in time ever been provided with a copy of any of the complaints, a copy of the names of any of the complainants, a copy of the investigation report, any supporting documentation, or any other information contained as a result of this investigation. I was informed that the president would be calling a board meeting to move the process along. I was also informed through my legal counsel that it appeared a motion for my removal was imminent and would be made at that upcoming meeting, and that there was indeed enough support for such motion to pass. Hearing of this, I both inquired and then requested that I be present at that meeting. At first, I was told I would be able to be present, but would not be able to stay for the vote if one were to take place, and that if a vote happened, it would be done in executive session. And then today, Monday, September 12th, I was informed shortly before the meeting that I would not be allowed to be present at any part of today's meeting. I then asked if those board members who made the complaints were going to be allowed to be present at any part of the meeting. I asked if they would be able to take action, meaning vote at that meeting if it came to it. And I was told the board, quote, would not set a precedent where individuals that have a complaint cannot vote. The consideration would be that if the complainant had something to gain, then that would apply. In this case, that is not the issue, end quote. I find this highly contradictory. I find this a direct conflict of interest and unethical at a bare minimum. You see, the members that filed the complaint absolutely do have something to gain, which brings me back to the two individuals who I believed filed the original complaint, Allison Black and Tasia Zintek. One of which I'm not even friends with on Facebook, and the other I am, but probably not for long. They'd most likely have us believe that they support equity, diversity, and inclusion. But everything they've done in this situation has indicated anything but. They've gaslit me, accused me, and made false representations of my name and my character. At any time, they could have approached me through a mediator or chosen a different path to open a dialogue in pursuit of understanding and resolution. But they didn't. They instead chose to cancel me, a human, a native man, a person whose personal beliefs and views differ from their own. From the beginning and throughout this process, I have been marginalized, alienated, and outcast from an organization and people I had grown to care very deeply about. When we talk about diversity and equity, that should inherently include diversity in thought, diversity in passion, and diversity in personal interests, along with diversity in both political and non-political beliefs. It should also include diversity in our own personal ways of being and diversity in our connections to each other and the world around us. Likewise, when we talk about equity, it should absolutely include equity in access to people, equity in inclusion in processes, and a fair and level playing field when it comes to deliberations and decision making. With all that said, I will now read my resignation letter submitted to the board earlier this evening, which is now last night. Bonjour, greetings, Jason. Please allow this letter to serve as my resignation as Secretary of the Board of Directors of the National Indian Education Association. It is with a heavy heart and great regret that I am forced to step down from my voluntary service to this organization. I have come to this difficult decision after suffering from the negative effects of over 3 months of lateral violence at the hands of fellow board members. The tumult I've endured includes having my name and character misrepresented, having been separated from my work on the board, and alienated from my friends, colleagues, and relatives within the organization. The actions and behaviors of various members of this board, regardless of however well-intentioned, have created an environment of distrust and division. This has been witnessed and experienced by not only me, but individuals both on the board and among the general membership. I no longer wish to subject myself to what started as unprofessional and sophomoric behavior, but ended as bitterness, marginalization, and rancor. In addition to the violence manifesting within certain members on this board, I am also troubled by the entire complaint and investigation process. From the beginning, the investigation appears to have been flawed and mishandled, and possibly unduly influenced by individuals on and off the board. I have been accused of endangering school safety and student safety and jeopardizing NIA's mission for simply expressing my curious mind on my personal Facebook page. If there were ever a case of abuse of the complaint process within the NIA board, let this instance serve as a case study. I was optimistic I would be granted a fair and equitable investigation and hearing. However, this process has become anything but. I had hoped it would be conducted on a level playing field. I was also hopeful the investigator would have looked into the very real potential of certain board members acting in coordination and collusion to create and promote a false narrative, and specific outcome, an outcome favorable to their personal goals and objectives. According to the NIA Constitution and bylaws, the Ombudsman is to oversee the complaint investigation process. Yet she was not present at a very important meeting between myself and the board on Monday, August 29th. And it was at that meeting that I was ambushed, unawares, and made to defend myself from documents and communications I have never before seen or been party to. From what I can piece together, certain information included in the report to the board wasn't specific to the complaint. Perhaps the Ombudsman presence at the meeting would have helped answer some of the questions and added clarity to both the documents in question and the presumed communications. However, she wasn't, and her absence allowed assumptions to fill the void where questions lingered. In addition, it appears there were non-Indian NIA attorneys in part crafting letters and correspondences in which the Ombudsman signed as her own, some of which were inflammatory and accusatory in nature. As a Native man, father, grandfather, advocate, businessman, and informal community leader, I would have never imagined the day fellow Native peoples would attack one of their own in defense of the United States federal government and their dependence on it. For over 246 years, the federal government has waged an ongoing genocide on Native peoples, including creating policies, legislation, and socio-political environment aimed at destroying our land, families, and way of life. I joined NIA with the ambition of sharing new thoughts, ideas, and strategies to help reconnect us to our natural ways and wean us from our dependence on government and Euro-Western ideologies. And today, I leave sadly, knowing that some continue to brace the paternalistic, patriarchal doctrines and philosophies of this land's colonizers. I do not fault those who wish to continue along this trajectory, for it may be a symptom of the looming issue of historic and intergenerational trauma and epigenetics. Does one chastise a caged bird for not flying? I would hope not. With that said, I hereby relinquish any and all oaths, pledges, and allegiances to the duties of this board and organization, whether by word of mouth, written, or otherwise. With this resignation, so does pass any and all responsibility or liability to NIEA on behalf of myself. In closing, I would like to remind us all that regardless of our personal views on politics, culture, or society, it is imperative that we allow freedom of thought and freedom of expression, that we embrace diversity in those voices different from ours, that we refrain from measuring others by the scales our captors use to weigh us, that we refrain from forcing others to view the world through the lens crafted for our own eyes, and that we allow others to live happy, healthy, and free so as to not become the sickness we claim to cure. Hate is simply fear unresolved. Fear is that of the unknown. The unknown is that which we refuse to understand. My experience tells me there is a sickness among the people said to lead this organization. It is a sickness of the spirit. And if allowed to spread, it will seek out and infect others. It will bring darkness to a once bright beacon of hope. Unfortunately, it appears that darkness has begun to cast its shadow upon the work of this board. I implore you to shine the light now before it pervades the good fabric which holds together this organization. Our ways as Native people are loving, compassionate, and humble. We are kind, nurturing, and gentle. And what has transpired among several on this board runs counter to who we are. This is the work of the colonizers, and now it seems they have us to do their work for them. To each one of you that have remained impartial and centered throughout this dark time, miigwech, thank you. To those of you who have maintained an open mind and open heart, chi miigwech, a big thank you. Thank you for the incredible opportunity to learn and grow. Thank you for allowing me to serve our peoples and bring about positive change. To those of you who have the slightest shred of doubt as to the authenticity or motive of these complaints, you are on the right path. Keep your skepticism alive. Keep that skepticism alive, healthy, and remain diligent in your endeavor to make a difference in the lives of Native peoples. We must not tolerate hate, division, nor identity politics, but instead choose to embrace love, respect, and appreciation. It was Maya Angelou who said, quote, "When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time," end quote. and I believe we've been shown. Respectfully, Brandon Tomes, Bawaji Gayash, he who dreams, he who sees things before they happen. Mejiken Nindodame, Turtle Clan, Waswaganing Nindunjaba. I come from the place where they use torches to hunt fish. Thank you. So that was both my written response and that right there was my resignation letter to the board, which was submitted last night, Monday, September 12th. And so with that, in closing, I leave you with these thoughts. The process. This was not a fair or impartial investigation. I actually intercepted a correspondence which was sent in error to me via email that was meant for the NIEA attorney. This happened before I even considered retaining legal counsel and was one of the main reasons I felt that I had no choice but to hire legal representation. To me, this signals that the organization was, and probably still is, not only paying legal fees in an attempt to cancel one of their own, but that they're also being unduly influenced by non-native people that are paid by the organization. To me, as a nonprofit, that's not a wise or meaningful use of the limited resources that a nonprofit organization has. And again, I intercepted that email by accident. It was sent to me, and it was a communication between Lori Quigley, the ombudsman, and Gregory Smith, NIEA's attorney, where they were going back and forth about the wording of the complaint notification letter to me, which I read earlier. And I have that documentation if anyone wants to dispute my claim. This entire situation has reeked of colonization and the loss of identity. The board policies and procedures, nor the Constitution and bylaws address a specific social media use policy. There are various agreements and acknowledgments that you must sign before coming on to the board, but nothing that lays out a clear expectation or consequences or procedures related to the rights and the complaint processes and all of the investigation that was involved throughout all of this. There's nothing that specifically goes line by line, addresses step by step how this should be handled. It's very lackadaisical, it is very blasé, and it is wide open for interpretation, which is dangerous because it leaves you with situations like my own where people can be accused of doing and saying things that they haven't done or said. Where's our Indigenous ways of being through all of this? As a Native organization, what happened to our traditional values of love, respect, courage, wisdom, nurturing, and compassion? When I came on the board, one of my main initiatives was to wean that board of their dependence on Euro-Western ideologies and philosophies, including Robert's Rules of Order, and on and on. However, I believe that because I presented a differing, alternative, diverse voice, I was not accepted by some of those members. Lateral violence, another topic that must be talked about openly. Lateral violence is often a manifestation of historic and intergenerational trauma. I don't fault people who suffer from historic or intergenerational trauma, but this is something that we must address. Lateral violence is often disguised as process, and it's disguised as process within systems and procedures for a specific goal and outcome. we need to be open to discussing lateral violence and lateral oppression. One of my mentors, who's now has since gone on to the spirit world, Mr. Rick Jack, Professor Jack, used to call it internalized oppression because he said we do it to ourselves. And we not only do it to ourselves, we do it to our own families and our own people. Case in point. Don't allow yourself to be silenced. This is something that we should never allow ourselves to do. I refuse to be silenced. Some things are worth fighting for, and to me, this is one of them. When you have truth on your side, there is no fear. There's no fear. And fear is a symptom of not knowing or understanding. And I understand, and I know what my truth is. And that truth is infallible. In this day and age of division and polarization, we must remain tolerant, accepting, and non-judgmental. In a world hypersensitized to differences, we as Native people should be embracing, protecting, and celebrating one another, not alienating and disenfranchising each other. Many of you know the story of A.J. Douglas Bear, the jingle dress dancer who dared to dance her own style. It is people like her who inspire me to continue being who I am. Her story is one of oppression, lateral violence, and resilience, and I hope to follow in her footsteps. People who know me know that I love my family. They know that I love my community, and they know that I fought tirelessly for over 36 years in defense of Native rights, in defense of Native children, in defense of Native communities and Native education. Since I was 14, I fought for our rights. I fought at the age of 14 for freedom of speech and freedom of expression when I was a 7th grader at Greenfield Middle School in Greenfield, Wisconsin. I took on the school and the school board, and I won. I was accused of something similar. I was accused of creating an environment that jeopardized learning because I had wore an Iron Maiden t-shirt and I wore Metallica t-shirts to school. And I was accused of disrupting the learning process. And I was suspended, I was put in detention, I was expelled, but I was eventually reinstated. And the day I was reinstated, guess what shirt I wore back to school? The shirt that I was expelled and suspended over. And it was also in 1986, that same year, that I was named the American Civil Liberties of Wisconsin, American Civil Liberties Union of Wisconsin's Young Civil Libertarian of the Year Award in 1986 for my standing up for other people's rights. I've also fought for treaty rights for years and years, which are the rights of really future generations that are yet unborn. So for anyone to say that I am a safety issue or they are fearful of me, that is simply ignorance, because nothing could be further from the truth. While some of the people on the board contend that they would have looked at this differently had I not, quote unquote, played the victim, I will leave it to the court of public opinion to determine if the outcome was consistent with the alleged offenses. Let me say that again. I'm going to leave it to the court of public opinion, including NIEA membership, to determine if me being exiled and having to resign before I was ultimately removed or potentially removed from the board of directors, was that consistent with the alleged offense that I committed, which were 1 Facebook post, potentially 2 Facebook posts, which I will include. Ask yourself, was it really worth the money, time, and resources that the organization expended to alienate me, to marginalize me, to character assassinate me? I was forced to resign again before I was removed, simply to save face. And there's no shame for me to admit that. I leave with my head held high. Those of you that know me know that I do not normally bring things like this to the public to debate. I don't offer these sorts of personal issues or professional issues to the general public in a forum to debate. But this is important. What has transpired here must be brought to the public. It must be brought to the public forum for input and debate. Without public discourse, we are no better than the most heinous of history's dictatorships or totalitarian regimes. I will let you, my peers, offer your words, thoughts, ideas, and solutions to this and other situations like it, because I'm not the only one. Remember that I love you all, and I hold no ill will or bad feelings towards anyone. To each their own. I leave you all with compassion and understanding, and I look forward to your feedback. And until next time, until we discuss this again, Gigawabamin Minowa. I'll see you all again. Thank you.